We must now acknowledge, therefore, that the expansion of the 1970s was not sustained in terms of support and was probably more of a public policy response to the racial upheaval in the country than a genuine response to the aspirations of Howard or the people served by Howard. I have no idea what will be done, but from the point of view of the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, it will be necessary for its leadership to be aggressive in seeking non-university funds. There will also need to be a far closer relationship between the teaching program, the research program, and the center. It cannot be simply the boasting point for the university, used by scholars from all over the world, but not by scholars at Howard, not by students at Howard. As far as I know, and I know little about the current scene, there is no plan that aligns the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, faculty research, acquisitions, and fundraising. That is a recipe for disaster. Choices must be made. One example may suffice, at least to spark a discussion. What should the MSRC's collecting policy be for African studies, for example? In Mrs. Porter's day, the aim was to be comprehensive, covering every country in Africa and every scholarly discipline in the social sciences and humanities. The state of research in those days allowed such a comprehensive outlook. Now, it is impossible for any university center to do that. Not even the Library of Congress can do that. What about African languages, for example? At one time, Howard had one of the largest African language training programs in the United States, headed by Dr. Mark Hanna Watkins. There, a substantial number of Peace Corps volunteers were trained. That resource disappeared with his retirement. And it is an example I would pose as a resource that was not seen in the context of the total university picture. That was Dr. Watkins' project, as far as people were concerned. Now, many of them who saw him walking across the campus did not know of his Chichewa dictionary or the fact that he was one of the world authorities on African languages. He was just the professor who joked a lot with students and faculty as he walked across the campus. As far as I am concerned, the university should have seen that program as a program to be developed institutionally, not Dr. Watkins' program so that when he retired it was gone. And I could cite many such examples. But that requires a plan. Now, Dr. Grant was talking about a plan earlier. I'm talking about a specific academic plan with specific investment targets and specific faculty targets, because you can't have a program with just the serendipity of what faculty members happen to come here. And we have the opportunity, because we now have a very mature faculty, for the most part, and that is not healthy for any institution, not because I am against mature people, because I am more mature than I could be myself. But Dr. Cheek had the notion of sending somebody 32 years old to succeed one of the giants of this campus, Dorothy Porter. And if you look at his appointments, most of them were very young people. But you have to have a plan now to recruit those people, because you have to do something for them. I am afraid my beloved alma mater has a reputation in many quarters as a graveyard for careers, when it should be an incubator of great careers. One of my proudest moments earlier today was when I saw before me the people who started out in Moorland-Spingarn, learned what they needed to learn to be first-rate librarians and archivists and research people, and then they went on their way in careers. That's what a university does. I never expected them to stay around forever and ever. And in our departments, the same thing is true. But when I was vice president, if we were to recruit an assistant professor in the sciences to do it properly, we needed substantial funds to provide startup money, laboratories, renovation, and so on and so forth. And that requires some intellectual choices. And this is not about the money first. I know we have a money emergency, but the question is one that I will relate from my experience as president of a foundation. I was president of what I call a stealth foundation. Most people had never heard of the Alfred Harcourt Foundation. They always wanted to look us up on the web, and, oh, you must send us your brochures. We had no website, we had no brochures. I went all over the United States looking campuses over to see whether they were likely places for us to have a program. And I would look at certain things. I'd look at their English department. That can tell you more about how good a college is than any other department. I'd look at their bookstore and their library. Then I'd talk to the president. One of my questions would be, President so-and-so, if you got $10 million tomorrow morning, in those days, and I'm talking about $10 million was more than it is now, but if you got $10 million tomorrow, what would you do with it? Now, if the president looked at me and said, well, we would have a committee, and we could develop something, I'm gone. They don't know where they want to go. Now, my question is, if Bill Gates said he was going to write a check, $100 million for Howard University, where is the academic plan that that money would be applied to? Now, that is an intellectual job. It's not a management job, except that you have to know what your current resources are and what your priorities are and some other things. But it is primarily a recognition of where the opportunities are intellectually, what the competition is doing, and then where are our strengths and our advantages. Now, if you think we don't have any strengths or we don't have any advantages, then all is lost. Because no amount of money can fix that. Howard, you do not know how strong this institution is until you begin taking a very close look at campuses across this country. You know, in my time of doing my work, I've seen 300 or 400 campuses and talked to faculty, and we have people here who are treasures. Now, I understand Moorland-Spingarn is a treasure, but we've got walking treasures, some of whom don't know they are treasures. You know, segregation did work. I hope you understand that. When I was a student, the faculty that we now talk about, the great so-and-so, they did not know they were great. They had been isolated, shoved to the side, and a number of things happened up here. Now, without making this too long, I'm going to say something because most of you don't know me. When I was vice president, I insisted on having an interview with every prospective faculty member. And most of my faculty colleagues thought I was nuts to do that, but it was very important. Now, there was a little dialogue that would take place that ran something like this. Now, Professor so-and-so, do you think that there's such a thing as racism in the United States?
Oh, of course, Dr. Winston, of course, of course.
Do you think it's bad?
Oh, of course, of course, of course.
By this time, the prospective professor is looking